Disclaimer: the following video can contain spoilers.
Being separated from his family by a flood, Mufasa, Braylon Rankins, would befriend Taka, Theo Semolu. Years later, a pack of white lions led by Kiros, Mads Mikkelsen, threatens his pride. So now, Mufasa, Aaron Pieri, and Taka, Calvin Harrison Jr., are on the run in search of Milele. I have to acknowledge the elephant in the room first. This movie throws away the history behind the original. As interesting as it sounded, this movie shouldn't have been made with that storyline. Not only does this new storyline ruin the backstory of the original, it also undermines and diminishes practically everything the original movie talked about. From the family dynamics and relationships to lineage, everything changes because of this movie. But is the story any good, you ask? No. No, it isn't. Even if you view this as a standalone movie. Let's begin. The movie opens up at Pride Rock. Simba, Donald Glover, announces to all the animals that he has another cub on the way, and so he must take his leave. Before he leaves, he puts Timon, Billy Eichner, and Pumbaa, Seth Rogen, in charge of Kiara, Blue Ivy Carter. As the storm sets in, Rafiki, John Candy, arrives and begins to tell a story of the past to help Kiara overcome her fear of the storm. This is probably me, but I personally didn't find this opening to be satisfying. Not only do I fail to see the connection between these events to the story, why the story is beneficial in this scene, say a lesson Kiara needs to learn, for example. No, being brave because of the storm isn't really a good reason. Apart from that, Simba and Pumbaa already got on my nerves. It's okay to be witty, but does every line they say have to be the butt end of the joke? It got old quickly, and I just want the story of Mufasa to begin. A long time ago, there was a major drought in the land. Masego, Keith David, and Afia, Anika Ani Rose, sing a song to Mufasa about Milele. And quite honestly, I thought Milele was a fabricated lie told to Mufasa so he can have the strength to persevere the drought. And by the end, I'm not entirely sure whether this statement was correct or not, mainly due to Rafiki and a lot of animals knowing of this place as well. But given its vague definition and location, I still can't make out if they just called Pride Rock Milele or not. Sure, animals in this movie said that Milele is just a story told to cubs, further proving my thoughts. But by the end, they called the lush lands where Pride Rock will be Milele. So I guess it was true?
But we can also be there right now. We can close our eyes, let our dreams take us.
But let's just continue. When rain finally arrived, it brought a flood that swept Mufasa away. Being separated from his family, Mufasa floats on a log as he is unable to swim. Before being eaten by crocodiles, Taka and Eshe, Thandiwe Newton, apologies if I butchered that, were there to save him. Not being too kind to outsiders, Obasi, Lenny James, does not accept Mufasa into his pride, even when Taka seemingly loses a race against Mufasa. Though I like how Taka won the race, but allowed Mufasa to win because he wanted him to stay, I think what happens next in the timeline doesn't make this scene worthwhile. And that was because of the second musical number. I've always wanted a brother begins, and well, things begin spiraling down with these musical numbers. The music and soundtracks are catchy and great, but the lyrical portion of it is not great.
What did you say about my brother? That's not a trait, that's my brother. You stay away from my brother.
Through I've Always Wanted a Brother, we get a time jump. The brothers are now older, and the song ends. I understand the usage of this time jump, but personally, I think it was a poor choice. Sure, we get the characters all grown up now, but I feel a lot of what makes them is taken away because of this time jump. Take Mufasa for instance. He is lost and wants to find his way back, but because of this time jump, we never really explore how that change affected him. I mean, truly affected him. Sure, he's accepted into this pride, even though it means he has to stay with the females. But it felt like he just gave up on his family, and on Milele. And no, talking about it through dialogue isn't beneficial. It does explain a chunk of this character, but it doesn't paint the whole picture, because nothing really comes out of it.
Your parents are still out there. We can keep looking.
I lost them, Eshe. You're wasting your time training me like this.
But these skills you have, no other male has them.
Obasi will never accept me. Well, maybe I like being a stray.
Eshe tells Mufasa that they can keep looking for his family, but for some strange reason, Mufasa just brushes it off, saying things like, "No, it's okay. I want to be a stray. It's better for me to be a stray," etc., etc., with no clear indication of how or why his mind changed. In short, this time jump skipped a lot of crucial key moments that coincides with character development. Not just with Mufasa, but his relationship with Taka, which is what the movie is heavily based on. The main takeaway from this scene is to show the relationship between Taka and Mufasa with Obasi. Obasi doesn't like Mufasa for being a stray, yet Taka shares a bond with him that makes Obasi kind of mad.
Trouble. That one is not my son.
Foss and I were just playing.
You two will never be brothers. Now go back to the females and stay away from my son.
Instead of showing his son the true way of being king, it seems like he neglects any responsibility to do so. And because Taka is next in line, he must learn what it means to be king. Unfortunately, it just seems like all it takes to be king is to sleep. And while that is a characteristic Lion has, because we never really see any sort of indication of Obasi actually teaching Taka any valuable things on how to be a great king, and more of this later, I feel it just kind of ruins Taka's character. But I'll return to this soon. Curious, Taka follows Mufasa and Eshe. Mufasa has the ability of great perception, which I believed he had because he was involved with the females for this long. He says he consistently gets sense of his past life, but it disappears within seconds. And this is probably the only recurring theme that was implemented well, even being used to defeat Kiros at the end, which was great. However, there were two bits that weren't really well executed: Mufasa's yearning to find home and Obasi's approval. In short, Mufasa's wanting to find home comes and goes. Because of the time jump, it felt like he gave up or forgot he wants to go home, only for us to be told through dialogue he still wants it. Much like Taka being king. And Obasi's approval was quick and unrewarding because of what happens next. It does add on to Taka's bad character arc later, so I guess that's okay? What I mean is that throughout the time we see Obasi, his disapproval with Mufasa is the most defining trait he has. And after Mufasa helps protect Eshe, Obasi appreciated Mufasa and he began changing his perspective on him.
I owe you a great debt, Mufasa.
And what happens afterwards? I have mixed feelings on. While they are hunting, they are attacked by white lions. The fight ends when Mufasa pushes Saju onto a branch, piercing him to death. In a state of panic, Ozebo, Maestro Harald, returns to his pack to tell Kiros the news. However, he didn't take it lightly and sought revenge against these lions. Bye Bye plays, and much like the second song, I got into it only to be thrown off by the lyrical part to it. And much like the second song, I understood its role and importance to the story, but I truly believe that these, and more, don't add much value. The lyrics aren't fully great, and the execution could have been better. Take Bye Bye for instance. Kiros is supposed to be menacing, but his constant delivery of Bye Bye shows the complete opposite. I couldn't take him seriously. It was also weird how everyone is just standing there watching Kiros as he sings Bye Bye. No one was doing anything. Worst of all, we cut away from any action there was. Yes, the birds flying away paints a vivid and impactful image. I would have just liked to see carnage. Or at the very least, to see Kiros and his pride be a threat. As well as showing Obasi standing his ground and not being such a wimp we've seen him be.
Males do. We protect the pride as we nap. That's power.
He never demonstrated any intellect or showed he had any good advice of being king. And maybe that's the point. But if that was the point, then they really did kill Taka's character. Because if these events never happened, Taka's life would just be sad. But I'll get back to this later. Being hunted, the Pride of Two set out to find Milele, gaining new friends Sarabi, Tiffany Boone, a lioness in a similar situation as Mufasa and Taka, Zazu, Preston Neiman, her scout, and Rafiki, a mandrill who was banished for his peculiar mannerisms. Together they ventured through the lands in search of the myth Milele. Long story short, Taka grows affection for Sarabi, but because Mufasa saved Sarabi, she doesn't share the same sentiment towards Taka. So when Sarabi reveals her true feelings towards Mufasa, Taka overhears and grows this hatred towards Mufasa. Falling from a cliff, Taka gets the idea to betray Mufasa by allying with Kiros. Taka leads Kiros into Milele, and Mufasa and Kiros have a battle. Now at the end, I question the story and why it was made this way. Sure, in its most basic form, it provides an interesting story of two unlikely pairs becoming brothers. That at the end, there is a betrayal when one becomes king, when the other should have rightfully been king. I just personally feel it wasn't executing using their strengths. The strengths this movie had was the relationship between Mufasa and Taka, Kiro's ideologies, and him being a threat, and the betrayal. But all these three strengths are kind of undermined and not played out well in this movie. Ultimately, even if you're looking at this as a standalone movie, it isn't a good movie. The relationship between Mufasa and Taka was brushed away rather quickly, like I mentioned before, but I felt that it wasn't strong enough. So when the betrayal part came in, it wasn't impactful. It felt more like Taka's response was baseless. From the many things he said, it could have all tracked back to his character assassination. I understand it was supposed to show that Taka is not a capable lion, but I felt the writers could have gone a different route. Instead of undermining him and making him useless in every scenario, why not show that he has some sort of cunning? Where in every situation Taka proves to be resourceful or helpful, Mufasa still manages to get all the praise and admiration. Where at first Taka doesn't notice it, until Kiros helps open his mind up when he corners Taka, that he gets that epiphany. And instead of becoming a good person out of it, he allowed this evil notion to eat him whole, and thus, in order to survive, he again uses this cunning to strike a deal with Kiros. The main reason I bring this up is because Taka's character was sadly terribly written. I'm not entirely sure whether or not he actually wants to be king. In this scene, he tells his father he isn't king, but a son, implying he doesn't really want to be king. Yet later on in the movie, Taka gets mad at Mufasa, saying that he is the rightful king, but has nothing, confused how Sarabi doesn't choose him, a king, implying he wants to be king. So which is it? Or when did he change his mind?
What kings must do.
But I'm not a king. I'm just your son.
Taka, please!
I'm the son of a king. But Sarabi chose you, just like mother, just like my own father.
The same scene, among many, also demonstrate that he's a coward, which I understand, I just didn't like it. Both of these aspects were recurring themes within the movie, until Taka goes through this metamorphosis and becomes the cunning and vile lion he is depicted in The Lion King, even changing the tone of his voice when he strikes a deal with Kiros.
Just as I will help you. But it was Mufasa who killed your son.
As for Kiros, for the majority of the movie, he is basically just tracking the group, and every scene he's in is merely just used to depict he is right behind the group. And these scenes technically don't add on to any character or provide any obstacles to the group, other than just to be a menacing presence. And it wasn't until the end, when there was a big fight, that we really fear for these characters. But by then, it was disappointing, where I didn't really see him as a major threat, especially when every single time he overrules someone, overpowers someone, or fights someone, it's cut. Again, my biggest gripe was that this story is heavily focused on Taka's relationship with Mufasa, yet they brush Taka aside. He does nothing and practically isn't a character come the second act. He's such a wimp and a loser that just completely ruins his character from the original. And yes, I can see that his character ends up becoming Scar. It didn't feel natural. It felt like a complete 180. The story should have provided subtle details and scenes indicating that parts of that cunning, parts of that mentality and demeanor is inside him already, but still chooses to do what's right until that crossing point when betrayal infiltrates his mind and corrupts him. Overall, Mufasa wasn't a movie I enjoyed watching because it destroys the Lion King every step of the way. From butchering characters like Taka slash Scar to the bad musical numbers. The worst part was the story itself. It wasn't as emotional or impactful as it could have been because the movie didn't put emphasis on the three things that mattered in this story. That being the relationship between Mufasa and Taka, the antagonist, and the betrayal. Sure, the movie looks good and the CGI was nice, but the story wasn't as good as it could have been, which sadly made me not enjoy the movie.
But anyways, those are just my thoughts. Did you enjoy the movie? Let me know what you thought about it down below, and I'll see you in the next review. Until then, God bless.